There are tons of business podcasts to choose from, but only one has the stamp of approval. Kristin Stampini is South Florida's leading real estate entrepreneur and your trusted source for everything real estate.
I would like to welcome our listeners and thank you for joining us for today for another episode of Podcast Stamp of Approval. I'm Kristin Stampini, co-founder of the Stampini team with RE/MAX in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm also a certified real estate coach with the Craig Proctor Systems and the owner of Global Virtual Assistants. The Stamp of Approval podcast was launched to share, educate other realtors, consumers, and other business owners across North America by sharing value and content to our listeners in each and every episode. I share my experiences, personal triumphs and failures, and strength throughout my entire life with the hope of my audience being able to expand their knowledge on everything real estate, business, sales, and mindset oriented. We recently also launched Stamp TV on YouTube. So find us there for weekly tips on real estate. If you like our podcast, all we're doing is asking you to share it with other people that could benefit from it as well. So today I'd like to welcome Philip Biber. And Philip is the president and senior appraiser and reviewer of an office of 6 appraisers, 1 quality control specialist, and a real estate analyst specializing in residential appraisal assignments in Miami-Dade and Broward, Palm Beach, and Monroe counties, including review work and consultation. Philip also covers all aspects of residential properties, also has a consulting service in mortgage fraud litigation and bankruptcy, and he's an expert witness testimony as well. So today we're going to talk about tips on what to look for in home appraisals and the truths and the myths of appraisals. And so we'll jump right in. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So let's talk, we were talking before this about different things for appraisers. So I can't, there's so many issues out there today in appraisals. I was talking about, an appraisal coming in and falling apart because of the mortgage. The buyer had a mortgage or whatever, and maybe it came in at, let's say, $350,000. The next appraiser comes in and appraises at $300,000. That's an issue.
It is, for sure.
Why does that happen?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, sometimes there's a fair amount of fluctuation when it comes to appraising when you have a very peculiar home or an apartment. And the forces at work, to what constitute value may be a little bit more different than, a tract home and a tract subdivision. However, typically it's incompetence. That's really what it is. Either one of them is good, one of them is not so good, both of them are bad. But normally they say the variation among appraisal reports, sort of an industry standard, plus or minus, is about 5%, which makes sense. Everybody's going to interpret, even 4 out of 5 doctors recommend something, not all 5. So it's the same notion. There's not perfection. It's not a pure science, but it's not pure art. Most of it is science or math, and there's a little bit of art, of inflection, of understanding the subtle nuances and how that works, because you can't give a number for everything. But you can take the art part of appraising and go, solar panels were $20,000 and we're in this neighborhood and here is what a reasonable party might pay for it. I don't have good, hard, fast data on that because we haven't had another one sell, but this is a minor part of it. So really, it draws back to the idea that there's probably some incompetence out there that's creating a huge diversity in the two values, because properly applied appraisal technique should result in a fairly small variation among 2 reports in the same neighborhood.
But you say 5%, but on a $300,000 home, $15,000 is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
You're going to tell a seller, oops, I'm sorry, oopsie, 5%.
Well,
so now it's worth $15,000 difference.
Well, hopefully it's not $15,000 less than your contract price.
Yeah, but that's crazy.
Well, this is the thing too, is there is, and I've seen many reports that have come across my desk for review, there is oftentimes a failure, in my opinion, and I consider that relevant to non-career type appraisers that we all deal with. I'm a real estate agent myself, and I've had the good misfortune of dealing with some non-career type appraisers who don't understand how to interpret the process of the contract. There are, I can back it up even further. There are appraisers that are still have a whiplash effect from 2005 through 2007 when there was mortgage fraud. And in their opinion, they give very little weight to the contract because there were a lot of fraudulent contracts back then. Now,
Today, though, that's
right,
totally different.
But it's like a child that's been beaten too many times, and why
isn't there more guidelines in place then?
There are guidelines. They just don't read them.
Yeah, but then why aren't these people not working as appraisers?
You'll have to invite me back for another show on that topic.
To me, they should be fired.
Well, they're contractors, so they don't have a boss to fire them. I'm the only guy that gets to fire my people.
Yeah, but the banks and the lenders and brokers and everybody out there.
You're opening up a giant Pandora's box.
It's a mess.
Because what there is, I love it. Don't get me started.
Oh my gosh, you got me started because now I'm really hot.
We've got a lot going on here, and I like I said, there are a lot of awesome appraisers out there, and those are the ones we want to encounter.
Yeah, but we want just them.
We want just them. However, you've got a whole group of people that have grown up in this appraisal business untrained. I came from an era 30 years ago where I had somebody standing over me watching my work, making sure I knew Hollywood Lakes, as in a previous podcast we had, that I knew the subtleties of neighborhood because he did it so long and he could guide me. Now there's quite a contingent of appraisers that worked for somebody for a year or two, went out on their own and found ways to get to appraisal management companies that work for lenders, and now just get their work that way with no training past 2 years. So they don't really, there's a good amount of them that don't really understand all this. And maybe they had a little whiplash from '05, and so they're afraid, and they really don't look at that contract and go, I've had to teach people that work for me, do not be afraid. Not all contracts are fraud. In fact, the majority of them are just great contracts, well executed, and look at them and look at them as that relates to your opinion of value. These people decided after they probably looked at 30 homes that this is what they want to pay. So give that a lot of weight when you go to look at the value and go, okay, yeah, that's about right. That's why sometimes appraisals seem to magically come in at the contract price. And people go, how did they do that? Well, because at the end of the day, the market's pretty efficient. Yeah. Something we talked about earlier. The buyers have seen enough homes. They've seen enough out there. They've taken in all the features and they go, let's put that into my computer and I'll give you $315,000 for that home. Because we've seen what they look like at 330. We've seen them look at 300. This is what they have. And their efficient mind comes up to that value. That's why oftentimes the appraisers actually are fairly reflective of the purchase price. It's when you have an appraiser that says, I'm not giving any weight to that because you never know with purchase prices. That's sort of that abused child syndrome that they're carrying over from 10 or 15 years ago when there was a lot of fraud in the market. There was a lot of stated income loans where people said anything they had to do to get the market going, and it crashed, and maybe they got in trouble. Maybe they got reported to the state and got disciplined, and now their knee-jerk reaction is the complete opposite.
No, I get it.
They don't give any weight to
Okay,
them.
I get it. But the thing is how do lenders, how do they pick their appraisers? How do people pick their appraisers? Mortgage, when using appraisers.
Man, these are huge questions.
Well, it's because it's a problem.
These are huge questions. Lending back 20 years ago, 25 years ago was more of a direct process. It was more of a local process where you had banks in South Florida like Barnett Bank, Sun Bank. They had their local panel of appraisers.
I remember all that.
Oh, good. And they had local underwriting as well. So it was a very well-capped, well-organized system. And most of their appraisers were seasoned appraisers who had a staff underneath them of junior appraisers like I was back in 1991, 92. So there was a lot of oversight. There was a lot of reconciliation to the lender in terms of a relationship with the appraiser. And my experience, which was a positive one, was my boss, who was an SRA, that meant he was a designated senior appraiser who took classes beyond what was required by the state, had a relationship with that lender, and they went out and they talked and they ate lunch, and nobody was paying off anybody. The lender wanted good, solid appraising, and he gave that work to us, and he trained us, and we answered to him. So there was not a lot of odd, wild fluctuations. If you weren't up for the assignment, he didn't give it to you. Okay, cut 10 years forward to that. Lending is kind of what changed the process. Lending went from local and regional to national. As lending went national, lenders who became national lendings didn't want underwriting all over the country. They wanted it in a centralized spot to create economies of scale.
They pick their appraisers?
No, this is what happened. So they didn't want to fulfill their appraisal orders all through their local branches. They wanted a system where they could start taking advantage of their economy of scale. Hey, we can save more money by having a centralized ordering process. So along came this notion of something called an appraisal management company. And an appraisal management company was formed and said to a big national lender like Bank of America, hey, you're in all 30 states or 50 states. We'll handle all your appraisal orders for you. You don't have to do anything locally. We will be your central ordering system. And the bank went, great. We can get rid of this burden, all the paperwork, all the Sallys and the Joes all over the country ordering their own appraisals, and run it through one central processing company, an appraisal management company. They pick the appraiser.
Okay, but if this appraiser is having issues and getting reviews all the time, can they get rid of that appraiser?
They can.
Okay, so why do the mortgage, I don't even know if you know this, but a lot of the time the mortgage lenders or whatever, they're afraid to go and ask for a review.
They're afraid to go and ask for a review of the appraisal. Like
we'll say, okay, this appraisal should have come in higher. And they're like, oh, well, and they try to give you, they don't want to just go and give it a review. Why? Why do they push back a lot of the time?
Well, I can't speak on their side, but my experience with the appraisal management and with lenders in general, because we work both directly for lenders and we work directly for appraisal management companies, is typically there is an appeal process. The appeal process that is typically in place for it's a best practices for most of these companies, is for whatever party that's part and parcel to the deal will submit, usually it's sales they feel are better sales, or why they don't like the sales in the appraisal, or what maybe there's misinformation in the appraisal on the subject itself. So typically there is an appeal process. Will they go and automatically order a desk review or a field review? That depends on the lender's internal policy.
So what about in a changing market? Like right now, we're starting a little bit of a changing market.
I love these questions. Good gracious. How many podcasts would you like to do?
I know.
It's
kind of crazy.
Changing market is awesome. Again, we'll talk about.
So are you gonna change? Is the price going to be a little bit different because you're going to think that the value might come down?
You might have a changing market in any direction, up or down. And it's the appraiser's job to interpret market data. And again, a good one will. A bad one won't. And where it really hurts the real estate agent is when the market's going up. Oh, they love it when the market's going down, because if the appraiser doesn't see it, the value will probably always be above the purchase price.
Do you know that
or something
this
like
appraisal, when I started talking to you and doing the podcast, I'm more concerned about appraisers than I've ever been after talking. Seriously.
As you should be. As I am.
Because, I knew there was issues, but I didn't realize that there is that much that they don't have. It's more of interpretation, and obviously it's an art and a science. But, to me, no wonder we have so many issues out there.
We have issues everywhere. This is a big one. There's a large contingent of people out there doing their own thing that aren't educating themselves. And then there's another contingent of appraisers that are really doing their best to educate themselves and get out there and go to seminars and learn the latest techniques and do that. Those are the people we want out there doing our properties.
Kind of the same in real estate, though.
I think it's the same in any profession. I think you have real estate agents that sell a few a year, and there's, there's nothing wrong with that, but how can that agent who only does a couple a year know all the ins and outs of real estate because they haven't faced that equation yet? When you're in there in the trenches and learning. But I can honestly tell you, I have fired many appraisers who just don't get it, and they've been doing it for 10 or 15 years. I have had people walk through my office looking for a job, and I'll say, bring me some work samples. And it's a running joke, and they'll come in and say, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. Why? I said, let me ask you a question. How did you get here? Well, I drove my car. I said, okay. When you drove your car, did anybody cut you off or run up behind you and tailgate you? He goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, somebody did tailgate. When you looked in the mirror, did they look like they were 16? They go, no, they were like 40. So how long do you think they've been on the road?
No.
Well, about 20 years. So just because you've been in this business for 20 years don't mean you're any good. Yeah. It's the same way out on the road.
Real estate, though. Real estate agents will tell me all the time, I've been in it for 30 years. Okay, yeah, they sell 2 homes a year. So I've done that in less than a year.
Right.
Okay, so I get it.
The unfortunate part is this boils down to your deal.
It does. The seller.
This isn't just a
and
title
the buyer,
company.
Both.
These are people's financial lives.
And it's their lives.
Riding on the balance of expecting that someone is going to go out there and professionally interpret the data, professionally execute, the information that is about the subject, its neighborhood, the sales, the market trends. Are the markets going up? Is it stable? Is it going down? And it's not rocket science, but left to a little bit of carelessness can have reckless results.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is, number one, it's all about how you're looking at the market in that neighborhood and what the trends are in that neighborhood. So there's no set thing.
Well, let's look at it like this. I build a couple spec homes a year, and that's up in the luxury market, right? That market where we have been in the last couple of years has not been so good.
Yeah.
But affordable housing has been on a tear.
Absolutely.
So if you get somebody that's not really paying attention, I've had to deal with appraisers that didn't realize the market was on a tear because their data was wrong, because they didn't take the time to really step back and listen to what everybody else is saying the market's on a tear in affordable housing, but they close their ears and go, I need to get this done by 5 o'clock because I got something I got to do.
What I'm looking at, though, is when you said, okay, yes, guidelines. Okay, so there's guidelines,
yes,
but there's exceptions. So what I want to say is that for, going 6 months first out as far as timeline, then a year, and you can go 18 months as long as you have,
I've gone back years depending on what the assignment
situation
is.
Then the size on how far about the radius, and if it's a beach, then 10 miles, obviously, whatever that is. So there's just guidelines, and that's all they are. It's not set, you can only go 6 months, or you can only go a year, or you have to go within a mile. Okay, I hear that. And then for upgrades and things like that, and again, like you said, a pool or something like that, it really depends. If this is a pool and everything in that neighborhood, the pools are $150,000 for all the homes that get more, it's worth more. How about, the upgrades, so the kitchens and things like that?
Well, interpretation, this is where the art becomes kind of important. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say we're in your neighborhood and you have a fully remodeled home. I mean, everything is brand new. And however, brand new meant they put in purple kitchen cabinets and orange granite countertops and purple bathrooms. Mm-hmm. And you say to yourself, that's going to take a very special buyer.
Yeah.
And somebody gets all excited. Well, this is what I did. Yes, you did all these upgrades, but the market doesn't prefer that. For instance, right now, we're kind of in a time frame, I don't know, I imagine you'll agree with me, where there's a lot of preference for white kitchens, light counters.
Mm-hmm. So you're going to put more value on something like that.
Well, I'm not going to put more value.
You're going to say
market's
the
going
market
to put more value on it.
So
sometimes upgrades is confusing because you can see where somebody might have upgraded inappropriately for what they're
No,
expecting in
I get
return.
that.
Well, you see that as an agent too.
Absolutely. So what I'm saying, from this episode, guys, number one, is what you need to do is you need to be, I personally feel that you need to be at the appraisal. You need to just bring as
Absolutely.
much information as you can, even get information from the seller. Do not just let somebody go out and appraise a price. Now, even more so today. Okay, now we went to appraisals before, but you better believe we will never miss it. It's your approach. But the big thing is bring all the information and data that you have. And some people will definitely, and if you're really nice and you talk to them and you just say, hey, I've lived in this area for 35 years or whatever it is, and they should at least take part of it and listen to you at some point to help them get the information for the appraisal. So the thing is there are a lot of appraisals out there that come in low, come in high, whatever it is, but just being at that appraisal as a real estate agent, if you're a seller, providing information, especially if as a seller, usually you guys know exactly what every home in the community has been. So put that information together for the realtor so that they can look at it and they can, I always ask, give me everything that you know. And then what I do as a realtor is I go and I research all that information ahead of time. And that's how we get, in a changing market, it's more challenging as well. What a couple tips can you give, and then give them your information that they can reach out to
I'll give you a couple quick tips as a real estate agent. Keep it short and sweet. I had an awesome experience last week down in Hawks Landing out in Plantation. I had an agent who's well-seasoned agent, and she gave me 2 sheets of paper. One of them was this, on the top of the paper was the subject and all of its features. On the bottom of the page was her 3 or 4 sales that she really thought were worth having. And that extended to the second page. And I thought, this is what an appraiser really prefers. What an appraiser doesn't need is 32 sheets of paper with a whole bunch of data on it. They're a filterer, just like you are. They filter information. So tell them what your home has in terms of features. Even better, assign what the cost of each of the upgrades is. I put new windows or a new roof. That was $10,000. So they get to see what was really spent on the home. And then give them 3 or 4 sales. Don't hit them with 30, because often, I believe in the heat of the moment, that really just gets filtered. Now they got to sort, and none of us like to sort.
Well, that's when they're going to push it aside.
That would be something I would encourage agents to do.
And then put bullet points on it and what.
Yep. Another thing, if you have something that's permitted that has not quite showed up in public records, handing them the permit right there when you meet them is going to solve a lot of problems, because it's going to keep your deal from being held up from an appraiser trying to verify. Because you said it was permitted, but nobody could prove it. Now that thing can be held up for weeks trying to talk to the building department. Have your information ready. Again, if you have the ability to figure out what your objections could be. Oh, I know they just enclosed this 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Or, oh, I know this is an unusual neighborhood. Have that stuff ready. Then you got your ammo.
That's right.
And that ammo is going to be used for good. Not to kill someone, but to keep your deal from getting killed.
Yep. Yep, that was great. And how can somebody reach out to you?
Watermarkvalue.com, or you can reach out to us by phone, 954-309-8064.
Awesome. Thank you, Philip, and thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Have an awesome day. Bye.